overall operation of the fort. Everything from barrel making to tanning of hides to blacksmithing. We're going to walk around and you'll get an idea of the operations here at Sutter's Fort.
I had coopers, carpenters, millwrights, gunsmiths, blacksmiths, and even a German wagon maker. My manufacturing businesses were progressing from year to year, and more notice was being taken of my establishment. Distinguished travelers such as the captains of trading vessels and important Mexican officials came and paid me visits. They were astonished to see what work of all kinds was being done.
Americans left the United States and headed for a new life in Mexican California for a number of reasons. One thing that inspired them was a report written by Captain John C. Fremont about California after his first visit in 1844. He described a country of mild weather, good soil, and uncrowded land.
This is Coloma, California, named after the Indians that lived in this area. You have a little bit of a view of the surrounding landscape. Very pretty place here in the fall. And it's here along the American River. No doubt the native peoples knew this long before the settlers came in, but there's gold in this river. And it was back in 1848, January 24th exactly, that a worker for John Sutter building a mill found in the trace gold. And it's here where the gold rush started. Interestingly, the United States had just finished a war with Mexico. Having no idea what was about to transpire, it's going to dramatically change the history of this country. So it was again along this river, the American River, that gold was discovered. We're going to take a look at the site where James Marshall was building a mill. As John Sutter's fort began to expand in its operation, timber, better said lumber, was in increasing demand, hence the building of the mill. So join me as we learn a little bit more here at James Marshall State Historic Park in Coloma, California. Here long before the arrival of the Europeans or John Sutter, James Marshall, etc. And you can see an example of one of their coaches, and simple construction, but very effective construction nevertheless. And so they would have lived around, in and around the river on the foothills. So long before the Coloma Indians were here, and no doubt they knew what was in the river. It just certainly wasn't valuable to them, as it would, of course, be to those who would subsequently come here in search of fortunes. We are at the site of the mill, and you can see it's a pretty crude, simple structure. James Marshall and a crew were out here working over the course of the month of January, putting this into place. You can look over here and see the saw, and there's a piece of wood up there, and so simply just taking timber and running it right through. And that would have been what the goal here was, to come in. You can see there's plenty of timber around. Cut it down, bring it in, mill it, and then send it back to the fort, and it would have been used for a variety of purposes. If you come over here a little bit closer, you can look down and see where gold would have been discovered. Down below, you'll notice that there's a wheel, and there that wheel would have been driven by the water that would have come through here, and in the trace, you can see where the water would have run through down below where the rocks are, and that's where the gold would have been discovered or found by Marshall, who then would take it back to Sutter, and they would assay it. In other words, they were going to determine whether this was really a find, what the value of the gold might fetch, and interestingly, they wanted to keep that a secret. But the word would get out, and certainly it wouldn't be a secret for very long. Let me show you a little something else here. If you come come over here, you'll notice the wood. And there is an example of just some pretty crude cuts of wood that this mill was designed to cut and bring over to Sutter's Fort. And so if you look around one last time into the foothills, you can see that there's plenty of timber around here for that purpose. So as they would have gathered the gravels and rocks from the river, you can see here, you'd throw it in and bring it, and then you'd have it stamped. Over here we have a stamping mill. Simply all that's doing is it's crushing the rock. And then from the crushed rock, the idea of course would be to be able to bring out the gold from all of these tailings. And so you'd find this kind of activity all through the mother lode, as it was called here in California. A lot of various means to bring out the gold. Along the river, they would have, of course, used pans, and they would have panned, they would have had sluices, they would have had long toms. We'll take a look a little bit later at what these devices were, but the stamping mill, those were quite common as well. And you can just see that it was mechanically driven. The rocks would have been taken and crushed down and pulverized, and then quicksilver or mercury would have been used to through the amalgamation process, and that's the way they would have brought the gold out.